Joining me now from the Columbus State House is the leader of the state Senate, a man in the eye of the hurricane for the last 6 or 7 months, the Honorable Senate President Tom Niehaus of the great city of New Richmond, the home of the Fighting Lions. And Tom, welcome to the Bill Cunningham Show.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for inviting me, and look forward to spending some time with you and your listeners.
Are you anxious to put Senate Bill 5 before the people coming in about 75 days?
I am anxious for people to learn the facts about Senate Bill 5 because I'm confident that once they do, they're going to say, you know what, this is reasonable reform. So, the more we can discuss it, the better I feel about it.
Do you think there's a lot of misinformation about Senate Bill 5? And if so, what are the 2 or 3 things you'd like to get out to the American people about what is going on with Senate Bill 5 they may not know about?
Well, clearly there is a lot of misinformation. First of all, there's this persistent myth that the unions and the others who were opposed to Senate Bill 5 were never invited to the table, when in fact they have been invited from day one, and their only response has been to say, kill the bill. You know, if it's not broke, don't fix it. We like the status quo. So that's one myth that's out there. There's a myth out there that we have ended collective bargaining, and that is not true. So those are a couple big misconceptions that are really fueling a lot of the angst about Senate Bill 5, or now what we refer to as Issue 2.
Sitting in that chair, I'm pointing to a seat about 10 feet from me, was Governor John Kasich, who I've known for, 20 years. And when he was here in February or March during the height of this, and it was getting near the end, I asked Kasich, Governor, why don't you meet? No, I said, not a legislator, not a House member or a Senate member. Why don't you meet with the labor union types, spend a quiet week or two, quiet things down, see what their objections are? And Kasich sat there and told me he would not meet with them.
Well, with all due respect to the governor, at that point in time, it was the legislature that was working on Senate Bill 5. Both myself and Senator Jones were active in those conversations, along with Senator Bacon and a number of other of our colleagues. And so while the governor certainly knew what was contained in Senate Bill 5 and was working with us, the people that we were asking to come to the table were those very same people. And we were more than happy to sit down and talk with them. But at every opportunity that they had to come in and speak to our committee and testify, they were asked directly by Senator Faber, a member of the committee, if you don't like what's in Senate Bill 5, what would you suggest we change, and what recommendations do you have? And almost to a person, their response was, we like the status quo, kill the bill. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
So you're saying the governor didn't meet, but you as the Senate president know upon the souls of your grandchildren that you offered the labor unions time to come in and testify or give their input, and you're saying it did not happen.
That is absolutely correct. I can tell you that, in fact, the president of the OEA approached me at a meeting in Columbus earlier this year, came up and introduced herself to me and said, I'm glad to meet you. I would love to come in and talk with you. And I said, great, here's my card. I'll be happy to sit down and talk with you. I look forward to it. Give me a call. Well, here we are, August 22nd, and I still have not had that call.
Now, another sad chapter of this is Bill Seitz. He's your friend. You two lived together for a few years, and he continues to be my buddy. It appears that you're playing hardball politics with Seitz by cutting his legs out from under him relative to chairmanships of committee. Upon sober reflection, was the treatment of Bill Seitz wrong?
It was not wrong, and let me tell you, first of all, Bill and I are still buddies. But while some people will characterize this as some sort of retribution for his opposition to Senate Bill 5, Bill knows better. He knows exactly why I made the change that I did. I told him before I did it, and at that time he said, well, this is all about Senate Bill 5, and I explained that it was not. Now, for anybody who doubts that, I would simply point to the fact that we have another senator who has been very vocal in opposition to Senate Bill 5, and that's Senator Tim Grindell. But he's still chairman of a committee. The difference is that Senator Grindell was vocal in northern Ohio. People in southern Ohio happen to hear Bill Seitz through your program. But, Senator Grindell is still chairman of a committee. So, the facts just don't support the claim.
But you two did separate as roommates, correct?
That was his choice. Bill decided that he did not want to stay in the condo that I was renting that I made available to him.
Are you willing to sit down with me and Bill Seitz at a breakfast, lunch, or dinner to break bread?
There's no, I'm happy to do that, but there's no reason to break bread. Actually, maybe I shouldn't say this on the air, Bill, but I think maybe you owe me a breakfast or a lunch. We had a little side bet, I believe, over a certain primary a little over a year and a half ago, and I'm still trying to collect on that.
Well, what I will do is call you and set up maybe a breakfast at First Watch about 10 o'clock in the morning, and would you particularly mind if I brought sites with me?
Not at all. Bill's a good friend of mine.
All right, now, moving on to the substance of this matter, it is likely Senator Tom Niehaus, president of the Ohio Senate, to come 75 days, very likely, if the polls are accurate, that Senate Bill 5 will be completely rescinded. Upon more sober reflection, or maybe somber reflection, would it have been better to have passed the Senate Bill 5, taking about 70 to 80% of what you could have gotten, give the unions 20 to 30% of what they want, so this thing's not going to be repealed?
No, I am very happy with the contents of Senate Bill 5 as it currently stands, in part because, very frankly, Bill, I don't know what the unions want. The only thing we've ever heard from them is, if it's not broke, don't fix it, kill the bill. To this day, they have not offered one constructive comment about the contents of Senate Bill 5 and what they would support and what they would not support. The only exception I will indicate is with the FOP. To their credit, they did come in and talk. They were concerned, among other things, about the fact that they did not feel that the original version of Senate Bill 5 gave them the ability to bargain for body armor or safety gear. And we wanted to make absolutely certain that they did have that ability, and so we made changes to the bill to reflect that, so they now have that protection.
Do you think that come November, if this thing goes down in flames, which I think appears to be likely, or you go back in January and put through another Senate Bill 5 and simply change it a little bit?
I'm not going to speculate on that because, frankly, I expect that the Senate Bill 5 is going to remain intact, that as people have an opportunity to actually review what's in the bill and separate the facts from the myths, they're going to say, you know what, these are pretty reasonable reforms. I'm paying 30% for my health care premium. I think it's fair to ask public workers to pay 15% for their health care premium. I don't have a guaranteed pension. I think it's reasonable to ask public workers to pay 10% towards their pension. I don't get a guaranteed raise every year. I think it's reasonable that we take that provision away and say to public workers, listen, we want to pay you based on your earning it, not just because you show up for work every day.
Senator Niehaus, many state workers who get a hold of me are very concerned about you changing PERS or one of the other four systems in a way that affects those who are retired or, say, above 30 years. If someone's put in more than 30 years and you change the system upon which they relied, wouldn't that be wrong?
For those people close to retirement, I would have very serious concerns about that. But understand there is nothing in Senate Bill 5 that deals with pensions.
Right.
So those people, again, are confused about two different issues. Clearly, we need to make some changes to the state pension systems to ensure that those people, good public workers who have been paying their dues by working with the state and working for us all these years, have the pension that they're expecting. But we will have to make some changes to it. But those people close to retirement, I think even the state pension systems have proposed a series of changes, and they looked at several tiers so that the people closest to retirement would not see a change. The people that are, say, 15 years, 20 years removed from retirement, they would see some minor changes. And new people coming into the system would see, more significant changes. But that has not been decided. It is not part of Senate Bill 5. And those discussions will occur over the next 6 to 9 months.
So as the most powerful legislator in Columbus, you're somewhat certain that if you're retired now, or if, say, you got more than 30 years in, there will not be significant change.
Yeah, based on what I've seen from the proposals from the retirement systems, I would say that is true. But the one thing that is important for, and I'm sure the retirees know this, their pensions are guaranteed. Their health care is not. And the real problems with the pension systems are the health benefits that are being paid out because it's diverting money from the pension system. So that's the area that's of great concern. But frankly, that's, for most Americans, that's the concern. Everybody wants to know how they're going to pay for their health care.
Now, lastly, last week, this was a big story that there were efforts made by you and by the governor to have the labor unions come in. And as I was told by someone in Columbus other than you or connected to you, that there was a deal on the table, that Senate Bill 5 would be taken down, would be repealed, and that, of course, the issue would be taken off the ballot and go back to zero, and then negotiate a change between now and December. Was that ever a real deal, or was that just rumors?
That was absolutely not true. There never was a deal, in part because the unions have never come to the table to tell us what they like and what they don't like. Again, their only response, go back and look at their comments at the time the legislation was going through, go back and look at their comments last week. Their only comment was, and continues to be, if it's not broke, don't fix it. They want to keep the status quo. They don't want any changes. And to this day, they have never offered one suggestion about Senate Bill 5.
Now, lastly, I guess you have about 8 days until like August the 30th. By August the 30th, things can be taken off the state ballot. And after that date, I guess it can't be taken off the state ballot. Do you have any sense, Tom Niehaus, that there are negotiations now underway to resolve this before August 30th?
At this point, I am not aware of any negotiations. I think the governor and the speaker and I made it very clear last week that, when you put this in the context of what everybody saw happening in Washington and the dysfunction as a result of the debt ceiling debate, we felt an obligation to reach out to people one more time and say, listen, we are still here. We are still willing to talk, but we need you to come to the table and talk as well. They refused to come and talk. Their response has continued to be the same. Everything's fine. We don't need any changes. But we remain willing to have a conversation to talk about the public policy changes that are needed to make sure that taxpayer interests are protected and that we pass some reasonable reforms that are contained in Senate Bill 5.
Some pundits have compared you to Nancy Pelosi, Tom Niehaus, in this sense, that Obamacare was jammed down the throats of the Republicans with no Republican input. And because of Nancy Pelosi's Obamacare difficulties politically, the country revolted and gave power to Republicans. Some say that Tom Niehaus is like Nancy Pelosi. He rammed down the throats of the Democrats a bill without Democratic input. Are you Nancy Pelosi?
Well, number one, Bill, I'd say I think I'm better looking than Nancy Pelosi. Secondly, the bill was not rammed down anyone's throat. If you go back to 1983 when collective bargaining was passed, we actually spent more time debating Senate Bill 5 than the Democrats spent debating the collective bargaining bill when it was first voted in. We invited the Democrats to the table. We invited the unions to the table. The Democrats basically abdicated their responsibility. They did not offer a single amendment to this legislation. And as you know, the typical process is when you introduce a bill, you have interested parties come to the table. They sit down and talk. You compromise on issues. You talk through issues. Well, the unions never bothered to come because they felt like just their point remains, let's keep the status quo. We like the way things are. We like having our guaranteed pension. We like not having to pay for health care. There's no reason for us to talk, so we're not going to talk.
When will you come back home and live under the laws that you've passed?
Well, I live under the laws that I pass every day. For instance, I'm currently paying 15% for my health care and have been ever since I've been in the legislature. But I will leave the public sector at the end of 2012 and come back to the private sector and look forward to coming back to my hometown of Cincinnati and in the community where I live now in New Richmond.
Well, Tom Niehaus, do you have any questions for me?
I don't, Bill. Let's just would like to list your help in continuing to cut through the myths and getting the facts out about Senate Bill 5.
Well, Tom Niehaus, it's hard to get the facts out if you and Kasich don't come on, and I think today was a good beginning, and I would love at some point to have on your good friend Shannon Jones and to have on John Kasich and have on whoever is that is promoting this thing, because some say this is Shannon Jones's bill, but in reality, you're the president of the Senate. Nothing moves without your permission, and the best way to get the viewpoints of your side out is to come on the air and talk about it.
Absolutely, and as I indicated to you Friday, I tried to call in on Friday, could not get through. You were kind enough to call me back Friday night. I said, let me know when you want me to come on, and here I am. Let me assure you of one thing. While Shannon Jones was the primary sponsor of the bill, there were 16 other senators that signed on and said, yes, we agree with this bill. And I will tell you that even before Senate Bill 5 was first introduced, in December when the Senate Republicans met and had sort of a mini retreat to talk about priorities, We talked about collective bargaining being one of the things we wanted to address, reform collective bargaining. When we had a more formal retreat in January, which the Senate does every 2 years, our caucus said the same thing. We broke up into small groups of 4 and 5 people, and every one of those small groups came back and said collective bargaining reform was something that we needed to address. So while some would, again, try to further the myth that this was just being done by one person, the fact is that the majority of the Republicans in the Senate embraced this measure and wanted to see collective bargaining reform, and Senate Bill 5, now issue 2, provides those reasonable reforms.
I look forward to our breakfast, and I say Tom Niehaus is not Nancy Pelosi.
I appreciate that. Good to be with you, Bill.
I'll be in touch. Will you come on in the fall as this debate is big time going on? Will you come back and face the American people in the studio?
I will be happy to do that. Just let me know when.
Mr. President, thank you very much.
Good talking to you.
Tom Niehaus of New Richmond. Let's continue now at the home of the Reds, 700 WLW.